Welcome to Sonara's Deep Dive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your source material and plunge right into the hidden histories and sometimes the cosmic mysteries that have shaped our world.
It's good to be here.
Today we're doing something a little different. We're not just looking at a religion in the way you might think of one. We're trying to reconstruct a secret society.
A very secret society.
A powerful subterranean cult that was, for a time, the main spiritual rival to early Christianity right across the Roman Empire.
We are unveiling the mysteries of Mithraism. And I have to say, this deep dive is, well, it's a challenge, to say the least.
Because the sources are so thin on the ground.
Exactly. We're operating with fragmented evidence. This is a religion without a surviving scripture, no unified holy book. There are no catechisms meant for the public to read.
So what do we have to work with?
Our source material basically rests on three pillars. First, the architecture, the unique design of their temples. Second, their iconography, these incredibly standardized but very cryptic images found inside.
And the third?
And third, and this one is maybe the most misleading, we have the critical writings of their enemies.
The early Christian polemicists.
The very same. So we have to read between the lines, constantly.
So that's our mission today. We're going to try and piece together this hidden history of Mithras, the soldier's god, and get a handle on the profound cosmic secrets that his Brotherhood was supposed to be guarding.
It's a fascinating puzzle.
Before we descend into those shadows, though, we need to establish who we're even talking about. Who exactly is Mithras?
Well, Mithras is a god of incredible antiquity. I mean, his lineage goes way, way back to Indo-Persian divinity. He actually originates in Zoroastrian belief.
So much older than the Roman Empire.
Oh, centuries older. Even before the prophet Zoroaster emerged, Mithra was considered the greatest of the Iranian gods. He embodies these huge concepts: light, truth, justice, and crucially, agreements.
Covenants.
So like the god of contracts.
In a way, yes. He's the cosmic enforcer of order, the divine witness.
Yeah.
He's the one who guarantees oaths and ensures that agreements are honored. So he's not just a sun god then.
Yeah.
Not just the Persian version of Sol.
Not at all. That's a common misconception. He's definitely associated with light, but his role is fundamentally moral and cosmic. Later on in Zoroastrian theology, he does take on the role of the son of Ahura Mazda.
The supreme god of light and creation.
Exactly. And that sets up this critical dualism that we see reflected much later in the Roman cult. Mithras is leading this ongoing cosmic war against the powers of darkness and falsehood.
The work of Ahriman.
Precisely.
You can see how that dualistic struggle, light versus darkness, good versus evil, must have been incredibly compelling for people living in the chaotic and often brutal worlds of the Roman Empire.
It's a very clear, very powerful narrative.
Okay, so let's unpack this journey. How does this ancient Iranian god travel across continents and millennia to become the secret patron of the Roman legions?
Well, the origin story of the Roman mysteries of Mithras is probably the greatest mystery of the whole cult.
Where do we even start?
The oldest literary reference we have is often cited as coming from the Greek historian Plutarch, around 67 BC.
Right, he talks about pirates, doesn't he? I remember reading that.
He does. He mentions Cilician pirates from the southeastern coast of modern-day Turkey who were performing these secret rites of Mithras. And he notes that these rites continued well into his own lifetime.
So that's the literary starting point, an exotic, secret ritual from the fringes of the Roman world.
A very dramatic start. A god entering Roman consciousness through, of all people, sea bandits.
But this is where that fascinating disconnect comes in, the one you mentioned in the sources.
Right.
Because the physical evidence, the archaeology, tells a completely different story.
A completely different timeline. It creates this huge chronological gap. Plutarch implies the cult was known, even if it was obscure, in the 1st century BC.
Right.
But the archaeological reality, the earliest physical remains like inscriptions, dedications, the temples themselves, that all dates much, much later. We're talking generally the late 1st century AD.
What's an early example?
One of the earliest identified reliefs of the bull slaying, the tauroctony, is CIMRM 593 in Rome. And it dates to around 98 and 99 AD. It's linked specifically to a freedman who served a high-ranking military commander.
Wow. So that's a gap of 150 years?
At least. And that century and a half of silence is where the secrecy really seems to take root. It suggests that even if these rituals existed earlier, they were either incredibly localized or just. They weren't building monuments, not until the Roman military and the administrative class adopted them.
And that physical footprint, when it does appear, it tells us exactly where the cult took off.
Precisely. It emerges and it puts down deep roots in the Latin-speaking West. It never really took hold in Greece or the Hellenized East.
No, no.
Well, you have to remember, in the East, the Persians were the traditional enemy, so a Persian god probably wasn't going to be very popular.
That makes sense.
Instead, we see these huge concentrations along the military frontiers, the Danube and the Rhine rivers, and in these crucial administrative and transport hubs like Rome itself and its port city, Ostia.
So this wasn't some kind of grassroots spiritual movement spreading among the populace.
Not at all. This was, from the beginning, a military and bureaucratic phenomenon.
And that brings us right to the core demographics. If this was a mobile, secretive faith, who were these people? Who was in this brotherhood?
They were, in essence, the empire's indispensable backbone, what you might call the mobile middle management.
I love that phrase, middle management.
It really fits. We're talking about soldiers, of course, but also customs officials, minor bureaucrats, merchants. These are men who traveled a lot, who needed tight community bonds when they were far from home, and whose loyalty was absolutely paramount to the imperial structure.
And it makes total sense that soldiers were the primary demographic.
Yeah.
But why did Mithras resonate so deeply with the legionaries?
It was almost a spiritual complement to their day job. Mithraism wasn't just compatible with military life, it sanctified it. The cult reinforced the military oath, the sacramentum. That was the sacred pledge of obedience to the emperor and the state. By aligning their spiritual life with their military duty, they were reinforcing fraternal obedience and loyalty to their fellow soldiers.
Their fellow syndexioi. We'll get to that term later.
Yes, it offered security in this life, through the Brotherhood, and also in the next. If Mithras is the god of truth and covenants, then following him ensured their spiritual safety, which was no small thing given the dangers of the frontier.
So it's structure, meaning, and a promise of salvation.
Exactly. Their spiritual practice was analogous to military service. It demanded discipline, it demanded loyalty.
And this heavy emphasis on the military and administrative world brings us right to a very key point of exclusivity, the exclusion of women.
Yes. And on this, there is an extremely strong consensus among scholars. Women were systematically excluded from the mysteries of Mithras.
And this wasn't just an accident of demographics. It seems foundational to the cult's identity.
It absolutely was. It appealed to, and it created a hierarchy specifically within these male-dominated social strata.
Why do you think that deliberate exclusion was so central and so successful in that Roman context?
Well, I think it created a kind of intentional spiritual elite. During that period, you had many public cults and even other rival mystery religions like the cult of Isis that were highly inclusive of women.
So Mithraism was carving out a unique niche.
By strictly excluding women, it created this unique space. A spiritual men's club, for want of a better term, where a soldier or a bureaucrat could establish a separate, intensely loyal identity, completely away from the domestic sphere.
And that isolation would just reinforce the bonds of the Brotherhood.
Of course. The shared secrecy, the feeling that they possessed knowledge that was superior to the uninitiated world that included their own households.
But we do have evidence of women making dedications, don't we? I'm thinking of Paterna, for example, who made a dedication to Mithras. How do we square that with this firm exclusion?
That's a crucial distinction. Women often made dedications, as you say, pro salute for the health or the salvation of a male family member, usually a husband or a son who was an initiate.
So it shows they knew about it, they supported it.
It shows recognition and support for the religion within the family unit, yes, but these acts don't confirm their presence in the ritual space. They weren't participating in the actual mysteries.
What about that fleeting scholarly debate about a possible female grade? The lioness or Lee.
Ah, yes. That was a theory that was debated back in the mid-20th century. It was often fueled, I think, by a desire to find inclusion where none was explicitly stated in the evidence.
And the evidence just isn't there.
It's simply non-existent. The term Lee appears, but it's in the masculine form, Leo, as a grade for men. There's no definitive proof of a corresponding female initiation. That theory is now largely dismissed. Mithraism was intensely structurally male.
So let's look at the operational structure of these male brotherhoods. They sound less like a vast open church and more like a network of tight, localized cells.
Precisely. They were small, they were localized, and they were highly hierarchical. A typical Mithraic community gathered around a single center, a mithraeum, and it usually only had about 15 to 25 members at any one time.
That's tiny.
Yeah.
That small size must have facilitated a really deep intimacy and mutual reliance.
It had to. And that intimacy was structured by this rigid ascending initiatory system,
The 7 grades.
the confirmed existence of an ascending ladder of 7 grades. Each initiate would ascend through these levels, gaining deeper knowledge and higher status within the community. And the leader was always called the pater, or father.
And the members themselves, they were bound by something more than just shared belief. There was a ritualistic bond.
Yes. The term they used for each other was syndexioi.
Which means?
It means those united by the handshake. And this handshake wasn't just a casual greeting. It was a physical, secret sign of recognition and absolute loyalty.
A secret handshake.
Essentially, yes. And it was meant to mimic the divine pact, the handshake, between Mithras and Sol, the sun god, after the great cosmic act of creation. It signified that they were partners in a sacred covenant.
And that handshake, that syndexioi bond, it was practiced in one of the most unique and recognizable architectural environments in the entire Roman world, the Mithraeum.
The setting is everything.
This wasn't just a temple. It feels more like a stage, specifically designed for secrecy and for community.
The architecture is absolutely essential to understanding their spiritual practice. Mithraic temples were unlike any public Roman shrine. They were purposefully sunk below ground.
Windowless.
Completely windowless. Often they were converted from basements in urban centers like Ostia, or they were built as artificial caves, which they called a speleum.
Why the obsession with being underground, with darkness and confinement?
Because the environment was the theology. The Mithraeum was designed as a physical, dark microcosm of the universe. It represented the sacred cave where Mithras performed the world-creating bull sacrifice.
So by entering this speleum,
The initiates were conceptually entering the cosmos itself. The philosopher Porphyry, he records that Zoroaster himself consecrated a natural cave to Mithras as an image of the whole world. So entering that space was the first ritual act of separation from the profane, everyday world outside.
and the practical function of the space was just as specialized. It clearly wasn't built for sermons or big public processions.
Absolutely not. The layout was designed for one thing, primarily: communal dining. It functioned as a triclinium, a Roman dining room, but underground,
Right. Small, long, narrow.
with the central aisle flanked by 2 long raised side benches. And this is where the 15 to 25 worshippers would recline for their sacred meal. Feasting was the central activity that reinforced the bonds of the syndexioi brotherhood.
So food and cosmic worship are completely woven together here. The meal isn't just an afterthought. It's a profound ritual act.
Indeed. And these ritual meals, they often featured bread and wine, which of course draws a direct parallel with early Christian practice.
A parallel that did not go unnoticed.
Not at all. This similarity was so striking, so provocative, that early Christian apologists, Justin Martyr most notably, they explicitly accused the Mithraists of having their sacraments diabolically copied by the devil just to confuse true believers.
It really drives home the intensity of the religious competition of that era, when one side is literally accusing the other of spiritual forgery.
And the preparation of these sacred meals tells us a great deal about the community's hierarchy. Archaeological evidence frequently reveals these designated cooking spaces, hearths or stoves, built right into the antechamber.
The antechamber, so the space you walk through to get into the main sanctuary.
Exactly, the transition space. So the architectural design physically manifested the social structure.
How so?
Well, if you look at what scholars call Model 1 mithraea, like the one at Karaberg on Hadrian's wall worshippers who were entering the main room, would have had to walk right past those tending the cooking fires.
Ah, I see.
This arrangement visibly reinforced the status of those who prepared the food, who were likely the lower grades or maybe even servants, versus those who reclined and consumed it in the main cult room, the higher grades.
But the sources also show that this wasn't the only way they did it. There was some fluidity.
Yes, there were multiple models. In Model 2, for example, if the Mithraeum was located inside an elite household, the community might just use the host's existing kitchen, relying on that household's labor.
Makes sense.
And then there's Model 3, which suggests more of a potluck approach, where individuals would bring pre-cooked items to share.
Which would imply a very different social structure.
It would. Model 3 suggests a more horizontal, less centralized community, where the focus was purely on the shared consumption, not the hierarchical labor of preparation. The variety just shows how Mithraism adapted to its local social environment.
So whether the meals were simple or elaborate, what truly bound these men together was the secrecy surrounding the initiatory knowledge.
That was the absolute lifeblood of the cult. Initiates took a solemn oath, an epitagma of the mysteries, promising never to reveal the rites or the secret knowledge they possessed.
And this knowledge wasn't something you just learned from a book.
No, it wasn't taught didactically, like a philosophy lecture. It was received as a sudden, transformative understanding, a spiritual illumination. The Greek word is ta telestikon, that was supposed to imprint itself on your mind and soul.
A transformative experience that you achieved by climbing the 7 grades. We mentioned the soldier and the lion, but for a real deep dive, we need to understand the whole journey. What was that ascent like?
The 7 grades were very carefully structured. They were aligned with the 7 known celestial bodies of the ancient world: the moon, Mercury, Venus, the sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn.
So it starts at the bottom.
It starts with the raven, or corax, associated with Mercury. The raven was the lowliest grade, the messenger, and the servant of the community. They were often responsible for menial tasks like serving the communal meals.
And they were symbolized by the raven bird itself.
A figure of communication, which echoes the raven that plays a critical role in the main cult image, the tauroctony.
Okay, what's the 2nd grade? This one is often the most debated, isn't it?
The occult or bride, the nymphus. It's associated with Venus. The name is very strange. Nymphus can mean bride or groom.
So it's linked to feminine imagery in an all-male cult.
It is, and that's the puzzle. It could symbolize the initiate being metaphorically married to the mysteries, or perhaps it links him to the moon or other feminine deities that sometimes appear in the iconography. It's obscure.
Okay, moving up the ladder, we hit the military core of the religion.
The 3rd grade, the soldier, or miles, associated with Mars, and this is where the ritualistic loyalty became overtly dramatic.
The crown.
The crown. The initiate was offered a physical crown, often presented on the tick of a sword. He would have to dramatically reject it, pushing it away and declaring, "Mithras is my crown. Mithras corona mea."
That is a stunning declaration of absolute higher loyalty. You're rejecting worldly honors for a spiritual one.
It was a very visible sign of a spiritual commitment that superseded everything, even imperial civic honors. By refusing the crown, the initiate was signaling that his primary loyalty was to the God of truth, not to worldly pomp. It meant he would never wear a wreath or a crown, even at public festivals.
What came after the soldier? I know this one involves fire and honey.
Yes, the 4th grade was the lion, or Leo, associated with Jupiter. Lions were symbolically linked to fire and heat. And this is where some very specific purification rites came in.
Not with water.
Not with water. The hands and the tongue of the Leo were purified with honey. Water was considered hostile to the lion's fiery nature.
So why honey?
This honey purification was meant to cleanse the initiate from sin and from falsehood, preparing him for the highest revelations of the cult.
The level of detail in the symbolism is just incredible. The specific substance honey, not water, it shows how deeply this esoteric elemental knowledge ran.
Absolutely. Following the lion was the Persian, or Perses, associated with Luna, the moon. This grade was a symbolic connection back to the religion's Eastern Iranian origins.
So they were like the spiritual historians of the community.
In a way, they were often connected to agricultural imagery, symbolized by the Perses bringing fruit or representing fertility, a nod to that foundational myth of creation from the bull.
And the 6th grade?
The 6th was the sunrunner, the heliodromus, associated directly with Sol, the sun. The heliodromus was intimately connected with the solar deity. He symbolically guided the sun's chariot or its path across the sky.
So he would have been central to rituals around the solstice?
Very likely, yes. Playing a key role in rituals related to the winter solstice and the movements of the torchbearers, scouts, and cautopates.
And that brings us to the top, the leader of the local community.
The father, the pater, associated with Saturn. The pater was the head of the community, the chief ritual officiant, and he symbolically represented Mithras himself inside the mithraeum. He was the keeper of the deepest secrets and the one who administered the oaths to new initiates.
Given this whole ascent through the grades, was it purely a spiritual learning experience, or were there physical demands?
Physical trials. The evidence, though we have to be careful because it's often filtered through hostile Christian sources like Tertullian,
Right.
it strongly suggests that the initiation involved significant physical and psychological trials. These were rites of passage designed to test a neophyte's devotion and courage.
Tertullian mentions a branding. We're talking about Roman soldiers, men who were used to pain, but a permanent spiritual mark on the forehead, possibly with a hot iron. That's a massive commitment.
It's an incredible commitment. Tertullian, writing in the 2nd century, he asserted that initiates were marked or sealed with a brand on the forehead. It would serve as a permanent, undeniable reminder of their vows and their loyalty.
Do we know if that was a literal branding?
It's debated. It could have been a literal branding or perhaps a highly symbolic, temporary marking. But the fact that he mentions it at all underscores the extreme, life-altering commitment that was required.
And the other rumored trials, swimming rivers, jumping through fire.
Yeah.
They sound like something out of ancient hero myths.
They do. The trials often seem to have mirrored heroic actions, forcing the initiate to prove his commitment by facing real danger, jumping through flames with your hands bound, or descending a sheer cliff face.
That would be a visceral, terrifying experience.
It would have to be. These acts were designed to break down your previous self and forge a new identity, the syndexios loyal only to Mithras and to the Brotherhood. That combination of esoteric knowledge, physical pain, and absolute secrecy define the entire system.
And all of this intense ritual, this hierarchy, this secrecy, it was all designed to prepare the initiate for one essential truth.
The cosmic knowledge guarded by the cult.
And that truth is encoded in the single standard image that dominates every single mithraeum. The tauroctony, the scene of the bull slaying.
This image is the spiritual and physical center of the entire religion. It's typically mounted directly behind the altar, the focal point of the whole room.
Describe it again for us in detail, because every single element is a key to unlocking this mystery.
The tauroctony is instantly recognizable, yet it's highly cryptic. You have Mithras. He's wearing his Phrygian cap and what we call Anatolian garb. He's shown kneeling, almost collapsing onto the back of an exhausted bull, and he's plunging his knife into its flank.
And he's always looking away.
Always. Looking back over his left shoulder toward the figure of Sol, the sun god, who is often shown in a corner of the relief.
And then there's the chaos of the animals underneath him.
Yes, the constant companions. A dog and a snake are moving up toward the wound, symbolically consuming the divine essence, the bull's blood. A raven is flying above the messenger, and most disturbingly, a scorpion is seizing the bull's testicles.
So what is this dramatic, violent scene fundamentally representing in their cosmology?
Well, on the first level, it is the foundational myth of creation. This heroic sacrifice of the bull is the very act that brings order and beneficent life into the universe.
So death creates life.
Exactly. From the bull's spinal cord springs wheat, the source of grain and bread. From its blood springs the vine, which gives the sacred drink they used in their communal meals. And the bull's pure seed, which is gathered by Luna, the moon, generates all the useful animals on Earth.
So Mithras sacrifices chaos to create the cosmos.
A perfect summary.
Okay, that's the creation myth. But here is where that high-tech knowledge you mentioned comes in. Scholars argue that this static image isn't just a myth. It's a fully functional celestial map.
Absolutely. The integration of the tauroctony with Hellenistic astrology is arguably the most profound secret of the mysteries. The entire tableau is frequently framed by the 12 signs of the zodiac, or you'll see Mithras flanked by 12 companions representing the constellations. The sacred cave itself is the vault of the heavens.
So let's break down those celestial associations. It sounds like they literally position the bull sacrifice within the night sky.
They did. The bull is, of course, the constellation Taurus. The scorpion is the constellation Scorpius. The snake represents Hydra or serpens. The raven is Corvus. The ear of wheat corresponds to Spica, the brightest star in the constellation Virgo.
So by placing these specific constellations around the central act,
Mithras is shown to be controlling the very machinery of the heavens.
and this leads us to the most compelling and frankly the most sophisticated theory of Mithraism. The idea that Mithras's great act represents the power to manipulate the precession of the equinoxes.
This is it. This is the core secret that made the knowledge so powerful and transformative.
Okay, this is a concept that we need to slow down for you listening. Precession of the equinoxes.
Right. So precession is a real astronomical phenomenon. It's caused by the Earth's slow, slight wobble on its axis as it rotates. Think of a spinning top as it starts to run down and wobble. This wobble takes a very long time to complete a full cycle, nearly 26,000 years. But what matters to ancient astrologers is that this wobble makes the apparent position of the stars shift very slowly against the backdrop of the zodiac over centuries.
And what was the cosmic calendar doing around the time Mithraism emerged? Where were the stars?
For millennia, the spring equinox, the moment spring officially begins, had been occurring while the sun was in the constellation of Aries, the ram. But for the 2 millennia before that, it was in the constellation of Taurus, the bull. That was the great age of Taurus.
So when the equinox shifted from Taurus to Aries, it signified the end of that age.
A massive cosmic shift, the end of an era.
So the tauroctony Mithras plunging the knife into the bull is a metaphorical depiction of Mithras using his divine power to end the age of the bull.
That's the theory. He is the cosmic force that commands the deep cycles of time. He's the master of cosmic fate. By understanding and controlling this precessional shift, Mithras wasn't just a god of creation. He was a god capable of altering the fundamental eras of the entire universe.
And this knowledge provided the initiates with not just meaning, but a direct path to the heavens. They knew how to navigate the cosmic cycles that he commanded.
That was the promise.
But pinning down Mithras's own identity as a constellation within that map, that remains debated, doesn't it?
It does. Some scholars look at his placement just above Taurus in the sky, and they see the constellation Perseus. Others note the shape of his figure, the wide shoulders, the flared garment, and they link him to Orion.
So what's the prevailing view?
The most persuasive argument, I think, is that Mithras is not a specific constellation. Instead, he represents Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. He is the eternal, mobile traveler who moves through all the constellations, ordering and commanding them.
And aiding him in commanding these celestial movements are his 2 eternal attendants.
Katas and Katpats. The 2 torchbearers, they are critical to the balance of the sanctuary and the cosmos. They're always dressed identically to Mithras, and they stand on either side of the tauroctony.
And their torches. What do they symbolize specifically?
Kotes holds his torch raised up. He represents ascending light, so the spring equinox, sunrise, warmth, the ascending node of the sun's path. He's the beginning, the life giver.
And Kotopates.
Kotopates holds his torch pointed downward. He represents descending light, the autumn equinox, sunset, darkness, and the descending node. They are this beautiful, simple encapsulation of the duality that governs existence. Light and dark, life and death, the turning points of the year.
It's an entire calendar system encoded into just 2 figures.
Mm-hmm.
But there is one final and frankly terrifying figure in the Mithraea that contrasts so sharply with the order and heroism of Mithras,
The lion-headed god.
the Leontocephaline.
The Leontocephaline, or the lion-headed god, is probably the most unique and disturbing piece of Mithraic iconography. It is a terrifying figure, often shown naked, entirely lion-headed, and frequently entwined by a massive serpent whose head rests right on top of the lion's head.
He's holding keys, a scepter, sometimes standing on a globe.
And often depicted with 4 wings. He's a powerful, non-human entity.
So if Mithras represents controlled, heroic, beneficial change, what on earth does this terrifying thing represent?
He is the physical manifestation of eternal, inescapable time itself, aeon. While he's sometimes been mistakenly identified as Aramanius Araman, the Zoroastrian force of darkness, most scholars now agree he personifies Chronos, or boundless time.
So he represents the terrifying, all-consuming cycle of existence, the relentless flow of years that devours everything.
He is a reminder to the initiates that time, in its vast, uncontrolled form, is terrifying and leads only to dissolution and death.
So he is the ultimate philosophical hurdle they have to overcome.
Exactly. The initiates sought salvation and eternal life, which meant passage through the planetary spheres and beyond the reach of this kind of terrestrial time. The horrifying spectacle of Aeon, with his open, devouring mouth and the serpent of eternity wrapped around him, symbolizes the very thing they were trying to escape.
And Mithras, the cosmic hero, provides the map and the means to navigate past this consuming force.
That's the promise of the mysteries.
The knowledge of Mithras, this incredibly profound cosmic system, the intense loyalty of the Brotherhood, it made it an incredibly attractive religion. By the 4th century CE, it stood at the height of its popularity, competing fiercely with early Christianity.
This was a genuine clash of titans in the spiritual marketplace of the empire. Both religions were competing for the souls of the same people, really, the mobile, ambitious citizens offering fulfillment and a sense of belonging in a very volatile world.
And the similarities are just. They're striking. It really suggests they were drawing from the same atmosphere of syncretism that characterized the late Roman world.
They overlap significantly. I mean, both offered salvation and eternal life. Both featured these central communal meals, the syndexioi feast versus the Eucharist, sometimes involving bread and wine as a sacrament.
Both used baptism.
Both utilized rites of purification or baptism, and maybe most famous of all, both celebrated the winter solstice, December 25th, as the birthday of the object of their worship. The birth of Mithras as Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, and the birth of Christ.
The early church had to address this, didn't they? They couldn't just ignore such powerful parallels.
They couldn't, and this led to the famous counter-argument by the Christian apologists that these similarities were not coincidences or borrowings, but that they were diabolical counterfeits.
The devil did it.
The devil, they argued, had inspired Mithraic practices as an evil imitation of Christian truth, specifically to lead the faithful astray. This narrative allowed them to acknowledge the similarities while still maintaining their own spiritual supremacy.
For a long time, Mithraism also had a huge advantage because of its connection to state power and the military.
Oh, that imperial patronage was massive. Roman emperors, recognizing the popularity of solar and cosmic deities, they often emphasized their own divine right through a connection with Mithras or Sol Invictus.
Like Nero.
Nero, early on, adopted the radiating crown to associate himself with the sun's divine splendor. Later emperors would often proclaim they were destined to rule by the power of the sun. This state-level validation made the cult immensely powerful, especially within the military apparatus, which was, of course, loyal to the emperor.
But that very foundation, its reliance on state power, proved to be its greatest weakness when the tide finally turned.
Yes. Once Emperor Constantine adopted Christianity in the early 4th century, and then subsequent emperors like Theodosius I began to actively legislate against pagan worship. Mithraism declined with shocking speed.
Why so fast?
Because the religion was structured around these small, localized, exclusive subterranean temples. It was relatively easy for authorities to identify and suppress the Mithraea. They could force them to close or just destroy them. The visible practice was largely exterminated by the early 5th century.
The cosmic map was lost when the caves were filled in.
A perfect way to put it.
But the knowledge itself, the theology of ascent and immortality, that didn't just vanish entirely, did it? If the temples were destroyed, those secrets must have found other ways to survive.
And this is where we look at the extraordinary survival of the Mithras liturgy.
Tell us about this text.
This is a 4th century text discovered in what's known as the Great Magical Papyrus of Paris, and it describes a complex ritual for achieving immortalization. It's a guide for making a ritual ascent through the planetary spheres to encounter the gods.
So this is potentially the cosmic operating manual that the Syndexioi Brotherhood have been hinting at all along.
It certainly seems to be an adaptation of that core theology. The ritual involves the adept, the magician, breathing in the sun's rays and uttering these secret, sacred words as he rises through the celestial path. He passes through the doors of the sun.
And who does he meet?
He encounters 2 key figures. A youthful figure called the God of the Great Look, who is unmistakably Mithras, and that terrifying lion-headed god, Aeon, who is seen breathing fire.
But the early experts on Mithraism, they sort of threw out the Mithras liturgy, didn't they? They called it a magical salad of Egyptian and Greek traditions. Is our modern reliance on it maybe an attempt to project a cohesion onto the mysteries that they never really had in practice?
That is a crucial point of contention. Franz Cumont, who was the preeminent early scholar of Mithraism, he dismissed it. He said it was just individualistic magic, totally divorced from the Roman cult's social structure.
But that view has changed.
It has. Subsequent scholars have argued that, yes, while it is syncretic, it preserved the essential Mithraic theology, the solar piety, the 7 planetary spheres, the terrifying Aeon, and that ultimate goal of cosmic ascent and immortality. It shows that the ideas, if not the formal brotherhoods, continued to circulate.
And those powerful ideas of brotherhood, loyalty, structured knowledge, they seem to surface much later, specifically in esoteric traditions like Freemasonry.
Tracing those echoes of Mithraic ideals into Masonic history is one of the most compelling parts of its legacy. And one specific connection is found in a high Masonic degree known as the Red Cross of Babylon.
What's the clear Mithraic link there?
The ritual story involves a debate where a prince has to argue before the Persian king Darius. And the prince wins by arguing that truth, Asha, is the strongest thing in the world.
Asha.
Asha is the core Zoroastrian and Mithraic principle of righteousness, truth, and cosmic order. It's the antithesis of the darkness that Ahriman represents. And furthermore, the degree incorporates the motif of crossing a dangerous bridge over a river.
Which is a parallel to?
It's often drawn as a parallel to the Zoroastrian Sinvat Bridge, the judgment bridge that the soul has to cross after death, a concept that was very likely present in Mithraic beliefs about the afterlife.
So those ancient Persian ideas of covenants and justice continue to resonate very strongly. And there's one last parallel that connects right back to the social structure of the mithraeum itself.
That's found in the values emphasized in side degrees like the Knight of Constantinople. Now, while it was developed much later, its core ritual emphasizes the absolute equality and humility of all members, stripped of their worldly rank.
Which is perfect spiritual echo of the Syndexior Brotherhood.
It's a perfect echo. You have to remember, in the Mithraeum, it didn't matter if you were a Roman slave or a commanding general. Once you were inside that cave, you were equal in the presence of Mithras. You were bound only by the handshake and the shared pursuit of cosmic truth.
A tradition of unwavering loyalty, structured equality, and this profound astrological understanding, all of it practiced in the deep shadows of the Roman Empire.
Mithraism was a uniquely powerful, exclusive, and intellectually rigorous religion. It managed to blend ancient Persian mythology with Roman military discipline and the cutting-edge Hellenistic science of the stars. It offered a complete, satisfying vision of order and salvation.
It makes that famous quote from the French religious historian Ernest Renan all the more potent. He said, "If Christianity had been checked in its growth by some deadly disease, the world would have become Mithraic."
That quote perfectly captures the intense reality of that rivalry. Mithraism delivered on its promise of a spiritual system that appealed directly to the very men who built, ran, and defended the vast Roman Empire.
We know the Mithraeans sought knowledge, the map of the heavens, the secret of precession, that would guarantee them passage through the celestial spheres to reach eternal bliss. They wanted the cosmic operating manual to find order in a complex universe. Which leads to a final thought for you. What knowledge or high-tech understanding do modern seekers pursue today to find order and salvation in our own very complex world? It's a thought to carry with you as we climb out of the darkness of the Mithraeum and back into the light of day.
Thanks for tuning into Sonara's Deep Dive. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of our future episodes. I bring you fresh content every week. Thanks for listening.